space, the final frontier. I've always wanted to say that and really, really mean it. But today we're not just talking about space exploration, we're talking about space resources, mainly asteroid mining. Now, you all may have heard about this in the news, but this is something that is really happening. There are really companies such as Planetary Resources, you can Google them and maybe go to their website, that are being set up for the express purpose of mining resources off of asteroids. And there's a lot of resources out there, precious metals and other things that can actually, assuming you can get out there to the asteroid, because it's all on the surface. See, here on the Earth, you have to dig way down to get to those metals, but on an asteroid, you can get those metals around the surface rather easily in comparison. So it's theorized that this could be $1 trillion industry. And in fact, there is a most excellent video by PBS Space Time, which I've included a link to in the video description below, that outlines all of the various possibilities for asteroid mining and indeed how much profit can be made. So let's look at some of the resources now that are available not just on asteroids but perhaps in moons or around other planets. So here we see water, which of course can be used to quench your thirst and keep you alive. Volatiles, nitrogen, carbon, so forth. You can use those for fuel or other uses. There's your basic soil and dirt, which if you're constructing a base or an outpost, you can use this to help shield against harmful cosmic rays. There's your base metals, iron, nickel, aluminum, cobalt, and magnesium. These have all kinds of uses. And then your precious metals, this is your really valuable stuff, platinum, gold, molybdenum, so forth. You can use these as catalysts, materials for batteries, and of course luxury items. So many uses. Then of course there's your silicates and oxides. These are useful for ceramics, agriculture, variety of uses, and so forth. This is just a partial list, I want to emphasize, of all the things that can be found across the solar system. There's much, much more. It's really like a gold mine, to use the analogy, in and of itself, just waiting out there for all of us to get. But the question I want to pose right now is truly, who is all of us? So as I said, there are a number of companies, including this one, this TransAstra, which I believe is currently NASA's looking at as well. There are a number of ideas to safely and sustainably, I suppose you could say, mine asteroids, including this one, using the light from the sun and amplifying that to sort of safely drill down into the asteroid and be able to then collect your precious resources. So I should add that, of course, these companies aren't just going to do all of this for free. This is, of course, being a capitalistic country and free market country, most of this is being done in the name of profit. And that raises a serious question, I believe. At this point, I would like to now introduce, to those of you who may be unfamiliar with it, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. This was signed by the United States, United Kingdom, and the then Soviet Union. But as of October, recently this year, 107 countries are a party to this treaty. Now, the key points are that there should be the freedom of use and exploration of outer space. There should also be the freedom of scientific study. Nations should be free to do any science they choose in outer space. And three, and this is a key point here, space should be beneficial to all nations. So I think that is a key question. What is beneficial to all nations? Also, what does use mean? Is this the equivalent of exploitation? You can just exploit it and use it however you want? Well, Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty clearly states outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. So what does this mean? Well, I'm a scientist, and as much as I hate to do this to you, I'm going to have to throw a couple of legal terms at you. The first one is res nullis. This is basically a term which means that anything which is not yet owned, such as wild animals or abandoned property, is free to be acquired by whomever can do so. If there's some property out there that's abandoned, you're free to go and get it and claim it for yourself. Then the second term is res communis, and I could be mispronouncing that completely, I don't know. Something which is owned or being used by all, in other words, the sea or outer space, perhaps. Now, these are Latin terms, so our legal system derives from these Latin terms, basically, and it is generally recognized that our Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty put an end to any concept of res nullis for outer space and established instead res communis. In other words, everything that exists in outer space should be owned or used by all. So generally either everyone or no one owns something in outer space. And I think this is very important here because what about all the poor people? We haven't talked about people in various countries all across the world who have nothing. So, was the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 written with these people in mind? At this point, we need to talk about the fact that most of these countries, Kenya, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Colombia, Honduras, they don't even have a viable space program. So when talking about asteroid mining, the free marketeers and the venture capitalists and capitalists, all this, they would come in and say, hey, our countries did all the research and developed rockets and things like that. So we should reap the rewards. We should reap the benefits. But the problem is, these countries, these people of these less developed nations, don't even have access to space. It's not even the same as in Africa. If there's a diamond mine, at least they'd have a chance. Like they could go and they may not have the technology or equipment that a more developed nation has, but at least they could go and stake out the mine and try to mine it before some Western company or country swoops in and completely takes it all. But with space, with asteroids and so forth, they're not even in the game. They don't have rockets, they don't have access to space, they cannot even mine these materials. The only countries that could do so are just a handful of countries: India, China, Japan, United States, and the European Union. Oh, and Russia, if I think I forgot to mention them. So it gets pretty thin after that, right? Honduras, Kenya, Nigeria, these countries, they don't have a space agency really, or if they do, it's just a really small one, and it certainly doesn't have the capability to mine asteroids. So should these materials, all these precious metals and other things that can be found around the solar system, should they solely be the domain of companies from more developed nations, which, as I said, there's only just a small handful? Or should these materials and resources be shared with people and other countries across the globe? Because if it's not, then you talk about wealth inequality. Now we're looking at the possibility for staggering wealth inequality, even dwarfing anything that we currently have in the present day. Like I said, this could be trillions of dollars we're talking about here, mining asteroids, and that all of that will only be in the hands of a precious few. So maybe we need to figure out some way to share all of these resources with people in lesser developed nations so that maybe they can build their own industries and they can rise up. Or, like I'm just afraid, super capitalists will come in at this point and say, hey, we did all the work to develop the rockets and the technology and so forth. We should be the only ones who get access to these asteroids. But is that truly in the spirit of the Outer Space Treaty? I don't think so. So this is an argument that I'd like to hear your opinion on. I'd like to see your comments in the comment section. Maybe you might even want to post a video response if you've got a lot to say about this. But I definitely like to hear what you all have to say about, we're talking about a new space economy that can enable human exploration and people basically going out across the solar system, maybe even colonies on Mars and so forth. Well, should that only be the domain of the rich Western nations, or should everybody across the globe take part in this? And if so, how do you do that? Keeping in spirit of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. So I want to hear what you all have to say. Please let me know. Thanks for tuning in, and happy holidays.